So just a quick recap. We have been talking about the British expansion in the subcontinent and how they were trying to gradually expand their control. We studied this 14 mark response last week as to how the Industrial Revolution in Britain was the most important reason for British taking control over India. There were certain other reasons combined with the Industrial Revolution, Indian weaknesses, different policies that the British were trying to introduce. For example, the Doctrine of Lapse of 1852 was a policy that was made to take over lands. They were annexing different provinces like Sindh, Punjab, Bengal. Then subsidiary alliance system was set up where the provincial governors were not allowed to have any army of their own provinces just because the British wanted control. Westernization of Indian schools, westernization of the education system, English being introduced as the official language instead of Persian. So, all of these things, social, political, military combined, became reasons for British expansion. Now, for militarily, there were certain successes for the British and certain failures as well. We're looking at these attempts in detail now as to which of these attempts were successes and which of these attempts were failed attempts by the British. So the question says, how successful were the British attempts in getting control over India? Now, this type of 14-mark question requires you to write successes and failures in a balanced ratio. Okay. If you generally think, once you read the question, if you think that the British were generally successful in taking control of India, so you will be writing more successes than failures. So, for example, because we always need to complete 7 points in a 14-mark question. So you can go with maybe four successes and three failures. This could be an appropriate ratio. However, if you think that in this question the British had more failures than the successes they had, so you will be writing four failures and three successes. So whatever you think is the most important, you will obviously start with that particular aspect. But in this question, what do you guys think? Were the British generally successful in expanding the control? Guys, what are your opinions on this? We've studied the British expansion. We've studied the reasons for the British expansion. So many policies, so many battles. What do you think? Were they successful? Nawal, would you like to add anything?
Yes, they were successful.
They were successful. Um, Emma, what do you say?
Yes, they were.
Yeah, absolutely. Because their control had expanded to so many provinces by the 19th century. India, Delhi was under their control, Bengal was under their control, Sindh, Afghanistan were under their control, right? So obviously they were successful, but they did have certain failures as well. So in this question, we will be writing 4 points for success and 3 points for failure. Let's look at this standard answer. So you're going to start with the failures. For example, sorry, successes. We can write about the modern weapons and technology. It was definitely a point of success because the British were so strong, so superior over the Indians in the battles. Most of the battles they won had decisive outcomes and they got control of so many different parts of India. Hence, they were successful. Number two, they were also successful by using local influential leaders, by for example, Mir Jafar was the army chief of Bengal, forces of Bengal, and he was bribed and he easily leaked out all the war tactics, and hence it was so easy for the British to take control. In Mysore, Anglo-Mysore wars against Tipu Sultan as well, Mir Sadiq was the general of Tipu Sultan's forces, and he turned against Tipu Sultan, and hence it was so easy for the British to take control of Mysore. Then doctrine of lapse was another successful strategy. They were able to take control of Nagpur, Satara, and Jhansi, very important cities, just because of this policy, which meant that any person dying without having a natural owner of the land, the land would go under the British control. So if let's say a family member had passed away and there's no like without an ownership transfer of that land, no one from the family would be would take over the land and said the British government will have the control of that land. So you see, this was another successful strategy of the British. Then you can talk about the annexation of Sindh and Punjab, very important territories. British were interested in Afghanistan as well. Russians were also already expanding towards Afghanistan, and it was sort of a rivalry between the Russians and the British. So before anyone else could do so, the British plundered into Afghanistan and took control. So this is another success. All right, so altogether, we've discussed four successes in the beginning, 4 points for how and why the British were successful in expanding their control. So remember, your analysis matters a lot when you're writing such a response. Each and every point has to be analyzed as it is a success. So you cannot just write the information and leave it that way. The information that you write needs to be properly analyzed. Now, if you're wondering what analysis is how you connect your reason back to the question. How the information that you write actually responds to your question is what the analysis is. So, for example, if the reason that you're writing is about successful policies like the doctrine of lapse, successful policies to take control over different lands. If you think, if you're definitely writing this reason, you need to analyze this as a success because we all know what doctrine of lapse is. We all know that this policy was introduced to take control of different lands. We all know that it was introduced in 1852. Your examiner would know that. But because you're writing this under this question that says how successful were the British attempts, you guys need to analyze it in a way that shows that this was a successful attempt made by the British to take control of the lands of subcontinent. Is this clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So if you look at this model answer, every bold line at the end of each paragraph is the analysis. So I'm going to show you one example, this one here. The British extended their control by using local influential leaders. Now look at this reason. This is where the statement has been written. So remember, you have to start off your by writing your reason from a statement. A statement is the straightforward reason that you mentioned in the beginning. Then next two to three lines are an explanation of that statement. That if you're saying that the British took control by using influential leaders, how? Give examples. Mir Jafar bribed in during Battle of Plassey. Mir Sadiq bribed during Anglo-Mysore Wars. You give these examples. And then the final statement will be your analysis. So statement, explanation, analysis, this is the structure of the reasons that you write. This resulted in expansion with elimination of tough rivals for the British. So them getting control over these influential leaders, what now? This is just a reason. You wrote that. But how is this reason contributing to a British success? Because it eliminated very strong rivals for the British. Like in the Battle of Plassey, Bengal was such an important province. Tipu Sultan was such an important warrior in Mysore. But by bribing their military commanders, British were able to eliminate those rivals so easily. So, statement, explanation, analysis, this is the format that you guys are supposed to follow. All clear? Should we move on?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Once again, for the students who are joining for the first time, I can see some new names for the demo. Guys, we are studying the expansion of British and subcontinent. We have done just a few lectures in history and in geography. You guys can reach out to me to cover up for this course and let me know if you have any questions regarding the module by the end of this lesson. Okay. And during the class, if you don't understand anything, feel free to ask questions. Okay. This is the question that we're studying. How successful were the British attempts in gaining control over India? Now, once you've written four successes, guys, you will be writing down three failures. Now, this is a balanced ratio that we're supposed to create in a 14-mark response. We've written four successes. There were certain failures as well. You leave a line, you write the statement that the British got failures in some of their attempts too, and then 3 points in three paragraphs for those failures. Once again, for every point that you write in failure, it has to be properly analyzed. It needs to be properly explained that this was a failure, how, why, you need to tell that. So the first one was Nawab Sirajuddaulah's attack on AIC base in Calcutta. So basically, Nawab Sirajuddaulah the governor of Bengal, he attacked on the EIC base in Calcutta first, and the British were not able to defend themselves and were defeated. And in retaliation to this attack, the Battle of Plassey took place. Battle of Plassey of 1756, Battle of Buxar of 1764. These battles happened after this Nawab Sirajuddaulah's attack on the EIC base in Calcutta. So you guys can say that this initial attack that happened because the Indians were so angry with the British and they decided to uprise. This was failure of the British because the Indians they dared to attack on the East India Company's base. Okay, so they were not able to stop them initially. This was a failure. Then the Anglo-Mysore Wars, although the final battle, Tipu Sultan was killed and Mir Sadiq leaked out all the war tactics and British won that battle. But in the beginning, it was a series of wars that happened at Mysore. So a few wars, of the few beginning wars were basically won by the Indians. Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, they defeated the British. So the initial attempts of the Indians were a success, hence the British failed those attempts. And the last one is the failure to capture Punjab when Ranjit Singh was alive. So although the British did take control of Punjab, but when Ranjit Singh was the ruler, he was such a strong, influential ruler that just because of his presence and his governorship of Punjab, the British were not able to conquer it. They did not make any attempt to attack on Punjab because they were literally scared of Ranjit Singh and his rule. So this authority of Ranjit Singh in Punjab was a sign of success, a symbol of power, and that became a failure of the British. So these could be the three reasons that you guys can write when you're writing failures of the British attempts. Each of these reasons is properly analyzed, making a connection with the question statement. Because now you guys, if you look at this entire question as an overview, you guys can make sense that we are sort of analyzing how successful were the British attempts in getting control over India. So basically, the question is asking you to analyze how successful they were, if they were successful. Again, we made an assumption in the beginning that the British were generally successful. This is why we provided four reasons for successes and three reasons for failures. If you guys think otherwise, that British generally failed, so you will be writing four failures and three successes. The examiners would accept all kinds of answers. If you're able to justify your statement, there's no right or wrong. If even if you, let's say, go against this and you say the British generally failed, so and you're successful in writing four reasons for failure and three for successes, you will still be given proper marks on that. So everything comes down to how well you analyze. But for the format that we followed in a success failure question, guys, again, this question asks us to analyze successes and failures. This is the second type of 14 mark response that we're studying. The first one was the reasons one, the very basic question. In this kind of a question, if you think that the particular scenario is generally success, so you write four successes and three failures and one evaluation at the end. So evaluation is a general statement of 4 to 5 lines that you write at the end to conclude your answer. That and you just summarize all the points. For example, in this one, because we've written four successes, our evaluation would be something like this: that generally the British were successful because they were able to take control all of the provinces. Although they did fail a few initial attempts, but generally they were successful. And at the end, the Mughal Empire was completely overthrown. The British had taken over the entire India. And for this one, if you want to go for four failures, again, 4:3 and one evaluation at the end. So whatever you think is right, you guys can follow that format. But 7 points altogether, you're supposed to complete seven reasons and one evaluation. So basically, 8 paragraphs for this answer, starting with the first reason. You do not need to write any simplistic statement. You don't need to write any introduction. You're not given any marks for those things. You directly jump into the reasons. That's all. Um, Everything clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Any,
sir.
okay. Any questions for the new students, guys? Let me know if you guys are confused.
No question.
Okay, let's move on then. Um, all right. So now, this is another type of question that says how successful was Indian resistance to British attempts? Now it's the same question, but there's a small twist. This one is asking you about Indian resistance to British attempts. The first one that we were doing was about British attempts and the success and failures of those attempts. But this one is about Indian resistance. How successful were the Indians in stopping the British? So you guys can, uh, generally our verdict would be, what do you guys think? Were Indians successful in stopping the British?
No.
No, they were not. Absolutely. So our verdict in the beginning would be that the Indians were not successful in resisting the British attempts. So we will be writing four failures and three successes. Although, yes, they did have a few successes. For example, the ones that we were studying earlier and as failures of this previous question. So basically, we're going to flip the entire question now. It is the same thing, guys. Most of your questions in your history exam would be very similar, asking for the same content with different wordings. So it is exactly the same answer, but we're gonna flip sides now. We'll the failures of British that we wrote over here would become the successes of the Indians now, and the failures of the Indians would become successes of the British now. Okay, so for the points that we wrote in the second half of the first question, failures of British, they're actually the successes of Indians because Indians were successful in resisting them, and all of these successes of British were the failures of Indians. So now, because our verdict is that Indians were generally not successful in stopping the British, so our first half of this response would be four failures of the Indians, how they were not successful. So let's quickly just go through it. The first reason is talking about how Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah had captured some lands of British in India. But Robert Clive retrieved all of those lands. He took control of those lands again. Mir Jafar was bribed. Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah was defeated and killed. So British got control of the lands again, even if the Indians did succeed in the initial attempts. This is failure of the Indians. Number two, Mir Qasim, Nawab of Oud Shah Alam II, they joined forces in 1764 in the Battle of Buxar. And after such a joint attempt, they were still not successful. And the British, they plundered into Bengal. They were successful. Hence, it was a failure of the Indians. Again, you see, we're analyzing each and every point there and then by stating how each point is contributing to the failure of Indians. For example, these three leaders, their loss over here was a failure because the resources were gone now. The British had control over such an important province, Bengal. Then this Anglo-Mysore wars, Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, they were all defeated, even succeeding some of the initial attempts. Mir Sadiq betrayed them. Their military commander was so disloyal to their own army. British got control of Mysore and all of its resources. This became a failure of the Indians. Another one was Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. He was forced to submit that he was under the protection of British now and not a ruler anymore when British entered Delhi. Delhi was the state capital, and entering the state capital and asking the emperor to accept the rule of the British was the biggest blow to the Mughal Empire and the Indian subcontinent. Hence, this was also the failure. So, we've talked about four failures of the Indian resistance with analysis of each. Does it make sense to all of you guys?
Yes.
Okay. Now we will be writing some successes of the Indian resistance. Again, we're basically dealing with the same reasons. You'll talk about how the initial attack on EIC base in Calcutta, this was a retaliation attempt over the British westernization policies and the British expansion. So some of the students, they get confused that Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah made an attack on the EIC base. How is this resistance? This is an attack. But this would be classified as resistance because the British had made a lot of attempts of expansion in the subcontinent through different policies, through Macaulay's reforms, through westernization, through replacement of language, etc., etc. So all of these reasons were, so this this attack was a rebellion against these policies. So this would be classified as a resistance as well. Okay. Then the Mysore Wars, the initial successes of the British, of the Indians, sorry, Tipu Sultan, Hyder Ali, all right, their successes would be a success of the Indian attempts. And then again, Ranjit Singh's policies, a symbol of him being a symbol of power. And British had accepted the thought of Ranjit Singh in Punjab initially when he was alive. So this also becomes a success of the Indian resistance. But despite these three successes, the British, they were obviously more successful in expanding their control. So your evaluation to this question at the end would be that, again, very similar to the previous question, that although the British were like the Indians were a bit successful in the beginning, but generally the British did take control of their lands. Even the lost territories were regained. So it meant that the initial successes meant nothing for the Indians. They were not they were very short-lived. Okay. So this will be it for the content from today's lesson. We're going to be starting off with the assignment just right now. Guys, if there's any question from today's class, please let me know right now. No questions? Is everything clear to all of you? The
Sir,
new, yeah, yeah,
there were some points that I still didn't understand of it.
yes, please let me know. Which points did you not understand, Dania?
It was just that there was just limited information about them, but I couldn't really get the point of it.
Like which points?
From Mir Jafferson's to the Anglo-Mysore.
Okay, so Mir Jafar's son, if you look at this point, what happened over here was in 1764. The reason why these points seem a little vague to you is because we had a lot of discussion in the previous lessons over the expansion in Bengal. Okay, once you get the access to those lectures, these points will start making sense. But let me explain these a bit. So Mir Jafar was the military commander of Bengal. Okay. He was in Battle of Plassey in 1756. So हुआ ये था, in the beginning, when the Battle of Plassey happened in 1756, the British were trying to take control of Bengal. And Bengal was under the commandership of Mir Nawab Sirajuddaulah. Nawab Sirajuddaulah was the governor. Imagine ये पूरा एक province है. There's a governor, Nawab Sirajuddaulah, and that governor always has an army and then a commander of that army. So Mir Jafar was basically the commander of Nawab Sirajuddaullah's army in Bengal. And in 1756, when the British attacked Bengal, Mir Jafar was bribed by the British. British approached to Mir Jafar and they said that if you leak out the war tactics, you will be made the governor of Bengal after we win this battle. And this is what he did. He leaked out all the war tactics. It is said that, before the battle, the rain happened and so the cannons that were to be used in the Battle of Plassey were left open in the rain overnight. And the entire gunpowder was wet, which was not able to, it was not used properly the next day in the battle. And hence the British had won that battle so easily. It's some of the historians write that this is what Mir Jafar did. And when they won the battle, Mir Jafar, for a short period of time, he was made the governor of Bengal, but later on, Robert Clive, because Robert Clive was the military commander of the British Army, he was actually made the governor because the British obviously wanted their own people to be on the command. Okay, and then this one was Battle of Plassey. A few years later, 9 years after Battle of Plassey in 1764, Mir Jafar's son, like Mir Jafar, he did what he had to do in the Battle of Plassey. His son, Mir Qasim, Nawab of Oud, Oud is a province, and Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor. These three leaders, they said, okay, let's join our forces and let's attack on British now and take revenge of what they did in the Battle of Plassey. So Mir Jafar's son, Mir Qasim, was trying to take revenge of what the British did to his father in the Battle of Plassey. Although his father was the one who leaked out everything and was just loyal to the entire um, uh, Bengal. In the Battle of Buxar in 1764, when these three people they combined their forces and attacked on British, they failed. British were so strong. Robert Clive was again the military commander, and even after making an attempt to sort of take revenge, they were still defeated. And British took control of Oudh as well because Nawab of Oudh, Oudh is another province. Nawab of Oudh was also part of this battle now. And instead of like having just control over Bengal and the Indians wanted the control of Bengal back, they even gave away Oudh. And the British got control over this another province. And Shah Alam too was also forced to accept that he was under the British command, under the British authority. Do you get it now?
Yes.
Yes. We've studied these reasons previously when we did talk about the Battle of Plassey and Buxar. And because we're like way past that point, so this is why these reasons were just basic points referring to these events in history. In 14 mark questions, you don't have to be the details that I just told you. This is just for your information, ताकि वो पता हो कि हुआ क्या था. You don't have to write down these details again and again in your answers. You just have to know these things. You don't have to refer to every little detail that who was Mir Qasim, what happened then, which battle was won by whom. So you don't have to refer to every details again and again. You just have to know a few important points, maybe the name of these commanders, who leaked out the war tactics and what happened after the battles. Just a few points when you refer to these events in 14 mark questions. Similarly, there's so much detail on the Anglo-Mysore wars, the Tipu Sultan. Tipu Sultan was such a strong military commander. Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, they were all so strong commanders in Mysore. Mysore is another province. And when British attacked on Mysore, the Indians, they were literally winning these battles. Tipu Sultan, Hyder Ali, they fought so bravely, but their own general, Mir Sadek, like I'm reading this one here, Mir Sadek betrayed Tipu Sultan like Mir Jafar did in Bengal in the Battle of Plassey. And because Mir Sadiq betrayed them, British took control of Mysore. Mysore was such an important province. Tipu Sultan got killed. Okay, so there's a lot of history behind all of these reasons. Um,
Okay.
right. Okay, guys. So let's move on to the assignment. Balki ab to we're like almost by the end of the lesson. Your assignment would be a follow-up assignment after this class now because we're done with the lesson here. I'm going to share the answers to this question: How successful was the Indian resistance to the British attempts of capturing land? And this is what we are supposed to do as a follow-up assignment of this class. As you read through these reasons to create your answers, do not copy what's written over here. These model answers are just for your support. Once again, these questions are taken from past papers, and all of these model answers are exactly what you're supposed to write to get like full marks on all of these questions because they're taken from marking schemes of Cambridge. But when you attempt these questions in class, you do not copy these down, read these properly, understand what's written, and then write your own answers because we're trying to learn what's here. We're trying to know this information. So when you get come across any of these questions in the exam paper, you guys know what to write. And just remember that questions are repeated in the history paper again and again. And most of these questions are going to appear in your exams as well. So take these questions very seriously because they're literally from the past papers. If there's any other question, guys, you can let me know right now.